In this position, most players are going to choose the wrong move. White has a very nice position. They've orchestrated a very good attack on Black's king, but you still have to be careful and play accurately. We're going to talk about this position in depth, but more importantly, how we ended up here and how White got into this great position to begin with. This game was awarded a Brilliancy Prize. This is episode 14 from a series where we're going through this book, Logical Chess, Move by Move. This game was played by Tarrasch back in 1916, so it's over 100 years old. And let's go ahead and just jump right in. So e4, we see another French defense. Now, just because we're looking at all of these games where the French, loses, doesn't mean that it's a terrible opening, but you do have to be careful, and that's what we're seeing in some of these games. Now, knight to c3 is the most common and arguably the best move that White can play. You can also push by. You could take or even play knight to d2, but this is very, very common. Now, in this game, Tarrasch played against Mises, if I pronounce that correctly, and they actually played a match where they played multiple games, and they played the same opening several times. I believe it was 7 times. And in those 7 games, Tarrasch won 5. Okay, all in the same opening. Okay, Tarrasch was white, Mises was black in these 7 games. Same exact opening. And this is what Mises kept playing, right? So I actually wanted to see if this was true for other players, so I looked it up on Lichess, and sure enough, from all 3 options, you've got bishop to b4, you've got knight to f6, and you've got d takes e4. D takes e4 is the worst performing option for black. So I don't know if you're a French player what that means. I guess don't play this line unless you really know what you're doing. Maybe the other ones are better, but I just thought that was interesting. So he's playing a line that he just didn't have a lot of success with, but I guess was really trying to make it work. Okay, so he takes. And I think part of the problem is there's no more tension in the center. White is the one with the pawn. White is the one with the nice piece in the center. Like, it just doesn't really look like it makes a lot of sense from Black's perspective, I don't think. Knight to d7, setting up to play knight to f6. If you remember from the previous game we looked at, Black can get into trouble with the queen coming out too early. And if you take this way, you kind of mess up the pawn structure. You're probably not going to want to castle this way. And so usually setting this move up with knight to d7 first makes a lot of sense. Knight to f3, knight to f6, and bishop to d3. So this is a really good idea. When somebody attacks you, if you can deal with the threat, but also do something else at the same time, that's good. Like, try to accomplish as many things as possible at the same time. That's what White does here. They deal with a threat, and they develop a piece, and they get ready to castle all at the same time. Okay? Bishop to e7, and White castles. I believe in the other game that we looked at, White played queen e2 right away, which added an interesting dynamic. This time, Tarrasch just plays it nice and simple, gets the king out of the center, and gets ready to use the rook if they need to. Knight takes e4. Of course, you take back. And the reason that Black took here, actually, this is an important point, is when your position is cramped, trading pieces a lot of times can help you. Now, if you guys remember from last week, this was kind of the move that was a very bad decision from Black. So what is different about this position compared to last time? If you saw that video, you'll maybe remember. Basically, the answer is in the last game when the queen was on e2, I think the king was already castled, if I'm not mistaken. When Black traded and we captured back, actually, I have it right here. I'll pull it up right here. This is the position. Yeah, this is the game from last time. When Black captured and White recaptured, look at this. It created a checkmate threat, and White was able to go on the offensive. Okay. In this game, notice that there's not really a checkmate threat. There's nothing that's really dangerous happening for Black. So it's a totally different situation. And that's a subtle detail, but it's important. Okay. So now Black plays knight to f6, and White simply retreats the bishop. This is a very good attacking piece. Don't really want to just give that up for the knight for no reason. And so White just retreats it. Okay. b6 is played. Now, when you see the move b6, what do you notice? Well, hopefully you said, well, the light squares are now weakened because, normally, like if I were to go check, let's just say with the bishop, you could play c6 and chase me away. But now, if you try to do that, guess what? I just take it because the light squares are weakened. Okay, if the pawn was here, I couldn't do that. So, okay, the light squares are weakened. How do we take advantage of that? Well, bishop b5 check is not a terrible move, but bishop d7 would be kind of an easy solution. So what Tarrasch does instead is knight to e5. And he's eyeing this c6 square, but also setting up to meet the natural bishop to b7 with a move. What do you think the move is? That's correct. Bishop to b5 check now. And now it's really awkward for black because you don't want to do this and get forked. That's terrible. You don't want to block with your knight and just lose a piece. That's terrible. So the only thing you can do is play king f8. But now you can't castle. Your rook is stuck. You can't get the rook to the center. That's not a good situation either. Okay. So very annoying move. And he's immediately reacting to the weakness that his opponent created, even at the cost of not finishing his development. Now, to be fair, he's developed most of his pieces. He's pretty much done. He's got 2 pieces out. He's castled. There's only one more piece that really needs to be developed. So he's almost done, but he's immediately striking at that weakness before black has time to kind of fix it by getting the bishop there to control all those squares. Okay, so what does black decide to do instead? Decides to go ahead and castle now, right? Castle while he still can before bishop b5 check comes in and causes him problems. Okay, so what do you think Tarash played here as white? Get a chance to look at that. The move is knight to c6. Now, he's going here to try to trade for the bishop. The question that I want you guys to think about is why? Why would you want to give up a knight that's very powerful sitting in the center of the board for a bishop that doesn't really look like it's doing a whole lot? Well, the answer is twofold. You're getting the bishop pair, which just in general is pretty good, especially if the board is pretty open, which this position is, relatively open position. And also, a more subtle reason is that this knight is the defender of the king side, and the bishop is really doing a great job of defending the knight. And by eliminating the bishop, he's actually looking to the future to, how can I attack over here? I think I'm going to need to get rid of this knight. I'd like to maybe pin it, but I can't pin it because the bishop's sitting there. So it's kind of related to this decision to play knight to c6 and trade for that. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. It is a little bit involved, but this is good stuff to understand. So black plays the move queen to d6. What do you think white played here? Well, I'm going to guess that most people watching this video said knight takes e7. And that's not what he played, okay? He played a Zwischenzug, an in-between move, where you don't play the expected move, you play something else first, and then you play the expected move. So what did he play? Queen to f3. Now, why did he play queen f3? Well, it's lined up on the rook, so you're threatening now to when you take, it unleashes the queen and you're going to take the rook. And the problem for black is that's a very annoying threat to deal with, because if you try to, use the bishop, well, I'm still going to take, and now I just take the bishop for free. You can't move the rook to save it because my knight would just take it. So the rook's kind of trapped. You have to deal with this threat. Even if you move your bishop away to avoid the trade, I could still go here with check and take the rook if I want, or an even better move is just take the bishop and you're still threatening the rook, okay? So it's just a very awkward situation that black is in. Imagine if he didn't do that and he instead just captured the bishop and then played queen f3. Well, now black just plays rook b8 and then bishop b7 next move, and the game goes on and it's pretty equal, right? So you can see how this one little in-between move that was kind of unexpected sets in motion what's going to happen for the rest of the game, right? It's just these small little things can make huge impacts, okay? So queen to f3, how does black deal with this? Black plays bishop d7. So they're defending the rook that way, since it was kind of trapped, to where now if you take it, you're not going to win a rook. But the reason that's bad for black is because they really wanted their bishop to be here. That's the whole point of playing b6. You want to put the bishop there, and Ketowit along this diagonal. But now it's on d7. It's just awkward. It's like, what? This was kind of a wasted move. Now the bishop's really passive. And all that happened from this one in-between move. Okay, so I hope you can really understand just how powerful that move was. All right, let's keep going. Let me see what happens next here. So he takes, queen recaptures. And now what do you think white played next? All right, well, he played bishop g5, which I kind of hinted at earlier, right? This was part of the reason why he wanted to get rid of that bishop, because now he's able to put this pressure on the knight, which is pretty annoying because he's already got the bishop lined up here. If you can use the queen later to attack there, and the knight is taken out of the picture, that could be very, very dangerous. And believe it or not, there's actually an immediate threat here that the white has. Okay, so for example, let's just say black played some random move like a5. Obviously, it's a bad move, but if they did play that, what could you play here as white? Well, the move is the surprising queen to e4. Okay, it's a wild-looking move, but you're basically saying, look, I'm lining up here. Now I'm going to threaten to take your knight and checkmate you. And if you try to take my queen, I'll take your queen and I have a double attack. I have a double attack, on the rook and the knight. Yes, you can save the rook, but now I take the knight. And not only that, I'm also hitting this guy. So even if I lose my bishop, I get the rook. Very, very tricky move, okay? And so that's the idea. There's this immediate threat after bishop g5, okay? Queen e4. So what does black do? Black says, well, let me just play rook to c8, get the rook away from the queen so that in those lines that we looked at where that got captured, it doesn't exist anymore. Okay, for example, if you go queen e4, you could simply take, and then you just go here, and at the end of the day, there's no capture. Okay, it's just a big trade. But that's not what white played. What do you think they played? You got a chance to look at that. The move is rook f to e1. Now, at first glance, it's kind of like, all right, we're trying to attack, and then we're just going to pause and like move our rook over. I want you to remember this move. Okay, I want you to remember this move. It doesn't really do anything now, but just make a mental note of it. Okay, I mean, it's still a good move. Like it's on a half open file. Just make a mental note. All right, let's keep going. So black plays rook f to e8. And there's something here that I want to mention. Because when black played rook to c8 earlier, they actually were thinking about playing c5, probably. And they abandoned that plan now and played rook f8. And let's actually talk about why. So if they played c5, what do you think white could have done? What move can you play here? Well, the answer is queen to h3. And you're threatening this checkmate idea. Okay, of course the knight's there first, but you're going to take the knight, and then you're going to checkmate. And the question is, how does black deal with this? If you play a move like g6 to block off the bishop, you create all the dark squared weaknesses. You go queen h4, attack here, and then something like bishop h6 check looks really good. So you don't want to do that. You could play h6, but then we can actually sacrifice. We're jumping in here with the queen, and the rook is going to come up and over at some point, and there's not really any way for black to stop it. For example, if you go here, you can, actually, this is a good moment to pause. This is a good moment to pause because this is kind of a tricky position. Maybe just forget about what I just said. This position, what do you play? White to play. All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, hopefully I didn't totally confuse you. It looks like, okay, we can't go here because of the pawn, but we can go to e5 and come over and checkmate, right? No, we can't because rook c5 actually defends against that. Okay, so this was black's very sneaky idea to stop the checkmate. But what you can do instead is queen to g5 check. And now when the king moves, you play rook to e4. You're threatening to come over here, which the rook cannot stop. Nobody can really stop that. And if black takes you, well, you've pinned their knight, so you just take a free queen. So that's kind of the idea. Okay, so a little bit tricky, but the moral of the story is that after c5, black was going to be in trouble. So they played the move rook f8, partly to give the king some breathing room. So in some of those situations, the king's going to be able to run away. And I think that's what the idea is. Okay, so what do you think white played here? Well, the winning move, essentially, was queen h3 anyway, right? This same idea of like, hey, I'm going to just try to take this, and your knight's there, which I can simply take whenever I need to. What are you going to do? So let's look. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a move for black, and I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to pause and try to find the winning combination, okay? So h6 is played. What should you do? Well, actually, these lines are very similar to what we just looked at because the fact that the rook is on e8 versus c5 doesn't change too much. A little bit. There's some subtle things. But at the end of the day, a lot of the same principles apply. So you could take here. You could jump in with the queen. And then after this move, which is a new move, right, because the rook is not there, trying to trade queens, you simply grab a free knight. And you got your piece back. Now you're up 2 pawns. And black is losing. Okay? So that's on h6. What about on g6? Well, it's the same idea that we kind of saw before. You play queen h4, creating this thread here. And there's one difference. Remember last time the rook was on f8, so you could go there and attack it. But in this case, you can't. So what do? The move is rook to e4, and you're going to come over and attack the knight. And of course, they don't want to take you because it's pinned, and black has no way to defend the knight. It's already defended the best they can do. The rooks can't really get there in time, and this is just coming over next move. And if you're wondering why you had to go to e4, if you try to go to e3, bishop c6 actually stops you. Okay, so that's kind of the point. So that's against g6. And let me see if there's any other moves. There's a couple other here that, yeah, e5 creates the discovered attack on the queen. So what do you play against that? Well, if you had a chance to think about that, the move is bishop takes f6. And basically you're saying, look, if you take my queen now, I'm going to take your queen, and I'm up a piece. I have 2 pieces, you only have 1. Yes, you could take this, but then I take yours. At the end of the day, white's just up a piece. Okay? And if they don't take the queen, and instead, I don't know, try to do something like this, well, then you can simply take the bishop. Okay? So however you look at it, white's coming out on top. And then there's one more move here that black could try if they just sort of ignored what you were doing and played c5. The simplest and easiest thing here, if you want to pause, well, it's just to take here with your bishop. Bishop takes h7 check. The idea is that the knight can't take you because it's pinned. You take the queen. And if they try to move the king, you simply go back. You're threatening to come in here. And after king back to g8, you simply bring the rook over. And white just has a winning position. You got a free pawn. Totally, black is all tied up in knots. Can't really move anything. And you're just winning the game. Okay, so I know we looked at a bunch of different lines there. That was all stuff that didn't even happen in the game. That was just what could you have done if they played those things. Okay, so going back to the original move here on queen h3, black actually played in the game queen to d6. So we get a slightly different position here. And this move actually does have some ideas to it. You'll notice that the king potentially can run away here. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so queen to d6. What do you think was played here? The move was bishop takes f6, which makes a lot of sense. You got to get rid of the defending piece so that you can keep attacking the king. And here we go. We have now arrived at the position that I showed you at the very start of this video. Okay, and this is the position where most players are going to choose the wrong move. So I don't want that to scare you, but just analyze it. Do your best. What move would you play in this position? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move that most people are going to play, I think, is queen takes h7. And then they're probably going to do something like this. And then black's king's going to go here. And what happens is you don't have any way to keep attacking. Actually, now you have to move your queen. And then black is the one who all of a sudden starts attacking you. And the king is actually safe. Amazingly, it's safe behind these pawns. So what do you do instead? Well, you could take with the bishop, but that doesn't really change anything. The king could still kind of run and do the same thing. So the move that you need to play, and what was played in the game, is queen to h6. You stop one square early because the most important thing is that you don't let the king out. Okay? You don't let the king out. So remember this. When you're trying to attack somebody's king, don't let it escape on the kind of obvious escape route. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to checkmate it, right? This was the obvious way that the king was going to escape. White prevents that. And now black has a problem because guess what? The bishop's coming in now, which is going to force the king over here. For example, you play a random move. This is just checkmate, okay? Check and checkmate. Okay? You can slow down and look at that yourself if you need to, but trust me, that's just mate in 4. So that's the idea, okay? Very, very difficult move for a lot of players to find, so don't feel bad if you didn't see that. All right, let's see what's happening here. Okay, so black plays f5 to block off the bishop, so now you can't take the pawn anymore. So what do you do here? All right, so do you remember earlier when I said pay attention to that move, rook f to e1? It seemed like it didn't do anything, but guess what? Now the rook comes up, and we see a key idea. When you're thinking about attacking on the king side, having a rook available to do a rook lift can be very, very valuable. Right, and that's what we're seeing here. Sometimes you can also leave the rook there and play f4 is another way, and you come up and over like this. But this is another way to do it, okay? This is something that I talk about in the middle game guide. I know a lot of you have downloaded my free 10 middle game moves. One of them that we talk about is rook lifts, and you can see how powerful it is here, okay? Because you're threatening to just come over here and checkmate, and it's very, very difficult for black to stop. If they try to push here to take that away, Well, they've opened up the bishop. We already saw this. Checkmate, right? Same thing. Okay, nothing changes there. And so what black tried in the game was queen takes d4. Now, queen takes d4 is interesting because if you play rook check, the king is going to tuck in the corner, and there's no longer a checkmate because they've defended it. So, what do you think white played in this position? Well, the move is c3. c3, which forced black to resign. Now, why is c3 such a powerful move? Because if you look at the queen, it needs to guard this diagonal. Because if you don't guard that square, then this just leads to checkmate. Okay, well, you can't take the pawn. You can't stay there. I'm going to just take the queen. You can't go there because the rook. You can't go there because the queen. You can go here, but then you walk into a pin, which means the only square that's available on that diagonal is h8. But what's the problem with h8? Now when I go here, the king doesn't have its escape square. And you have to block and the game is over. That's it. It just forces the queen off the diagonal. There's nothing the black can do. And the game is over. Wow. So really nice game. And honestly, guys, it all started going back to right here. It all started right here when black played b6 and white jumped in and set in motion all these things. Now, key feature was the in-between move right here, right? Queen f3. If you didn't see queen f3, you weren't going to get that nice attack. Okay? But after this, it was just black never really had a chance to recover. It was just one threat after the next. And here we are a few moves later. The game is just over just like that. Okay? So, super nice game. You can see why they awarded a Brilliancy Prize. Yeah, really, really great stuff. All right, let me just go ahead and jump into questions from last week. All right, so question from Christian Frost 8660. So black shouldn't have taken on e4. They also shouldn't have played b6, both of which look like standard moves. So what should black have played? So really good question. So this is the game from last time. And in this position, we talked about how knight takes e4 was kind of the first move that set black up for some trouble because the queen captured. Now you have to deal with this threat. And then also b6 wasn't ideal, even though it looks like a very natural move. It just allowed white to continue with the attack and ultimately win the game. Okay, go watch the previous episode if you didn't catch that. So the question is, well, what should they have done instead? And what's funny is the Stockfish recommendation in this position is the move b6. And it just goes to show how the right move can be the wrong move if you play it at the wrong time. Let me say that again. The right move can be the wrong move if you play it at the wrong time. There's nothing wrong with b6 and trying to put the bishop here. But the order that black did it in was wrong. Because now, what is white going to do? I mean, yeah, you could take here, but your queen never has a chance to come up and over. You never get a chance to threaten the stuff there, and black's going to have time to put the bishop there. The game goes on, and we have a nice equal position, right? So not only playing the right moves, but playing them at the right time is important. And that's what I think we see here, right? Black just was a little bit off, right? They were just thought that, well, let me just trade this first, put my knight here, and then I'll get my bishop out. Nope, too late. Because by allowing white's queen to come up and over like that, you set yourself up to get attacked. So you had to play b6 first, while right here, you had to play b6 before white's queen was able to do that. Okay? So very, very subtle stuff, but it makes all the difference. So good question. I hope that makes sense. And yeah, hope you guys are enjoying the series. I'll see you next time, episode 15. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.